Hi guys, welcome back to Belle's Books. I'm Carly and today I am bringing you a very belated wrap up of the books that I read in May and June. Yes, I know it is the end of July. I'll be filming my July wrap up next. But today we're just going to talk through the books that I have read recently. I didn't read very much in May. It was the tail end of my reading slump. So I've only got 2 books to talk to you about from May. The first of which was a read for the Springathon Readathon that was hosted by my lovely friend Emma over at Cup of Books. I'll link her channel in the description box down below. This was a nature writing readathon, and the only criteria was to read a non-fiction book about nature, and I failed because the one I chose that I was really looking forward to, I DNF'd. So I tried to read Life in the Garden by Penelope Lively, and I had high hopes for this. Also, it has a beautiful cover. I'm a keen gardener, as I've mentioned before. I have a garden and allotment, so I thought this would be right up my street because it is about gardening and how gardening and writing intertwine. Perfect. No, it really wasn't. I've not read any other Penelope Lively. So please talk to me if you have read her fiction, but I just found this super dull. It was really boring. I found the writing quite stunted. Sorry, there's a lot of noise outside my window. Lots of children are apparently walking past shouting. I got to page 88 and I just gave up because I was like, oh, this is so dull, and why am I putting myself through this? It started off well because she started talking about Virginia Woolf and her garden. I'm always down for any information about Virginia Woolf, but then it just got really dull and boring, and I can't even tell you what I read. It was that good. There was a lot of description, I think. I remember. Now, as much as I love gardening, I don't know the names of plants. I just shove them in and see what happens. And there was a lot of description about this plant and that plant and how this particular garden looked in this artist representation. And yeah, I just didn't gel with it, so I DNF'd it. And I still got my bookmark in there. I'm thinking maybe I'll go back to it, but I probably won't because it wasn't for me. It wasn't for me. So completely failed at Springathon this year. Try again next year. So yeah, sad times. First book DNF. The next book was an audiobook, and I've mentioned before that I was struggling a little bit with audiobooks. Again, it took me a while to finish that one. It was A Single Thread by Tracy Chevalier. Completely went out of my mind there. Which I did actually very much enjoy, even though it took me a while to get through because I can't concentrate on audiobooks in the house. I don't have a commute anymore, as I've mentioned, so I listened to it off and on, mostly while I was doing the washing up, I think, and while I was driving about going to the shops. But I very much enjoyed it. I like Tracy Chevalier's writing anyway. One of my my favourite books is Girl with a Pearl Earring. I adored that. This book, Single Thread, is set just after the First World War. Is it the First World War or is it the Second? No, it's the first. Yes, it's the First World War. And it concentrates on the character of Violet Speedwell, who is a surplus woman, as in she was one of the women left over because a lot of the men had died, including her fiance and her brother. So there were a lot of single women about. She was one of them, trying to make a life for themselves. So we follow Violet's character, who I adored. She was just trying to get by, trying to do her own thing, trying to live her life. She's got a very domineering mother who expected her to look after her, and her mother was just a cowbag. So Violet moves to Winchester in her own little grotty flat. She gets a crappy little job as I think it's an insurance company, typing. And she falls in with a set of broderers, which is a word I'd not heard before. They are the women who sew the kneelers and the cushions that you get in churches. So there's you can tell there's a whole lot of research done on this book about broderers and bell ringers and all that kind of thing. It was a very gentle read. It was perfect because I was like suffering from some high anxiety about, you know, what everything's going on in the world. So it was really nice to read or listen to kind of feel calm, even though it was like set after the war and there was references to a lot of people dealing with post-traumatic stress from the war and a lot of the men coming back traumatized. It was just a very gentle and slow book, and that was really nice and calming to listen to. So Violet's character kind of trying to navigate her way through being an independent woman. She's not earning much, but she kind of tries to bargain with her boss to get more money because she's like really struggling to get by. It's a choice between eating and going to the cinema, and her life is so dull that she has to go to the cinema once a week to do something fun. So she'll forego a meal to go to the cinema, that kind of level of poverty. And it was just like a real joy. It talks about how women have to had to navigate their safety when they were single women, and there's a lot of commentary on, she likes to go walking, so there was a lot of commentary on what, you're walking alone, and she kind of puts herself in danger because she's walking alone by herself during the day. She's therefore at risk of being attacked by weirdo men. But she's a real kind of, I loved her character. She's a real kind of spunky woman, and she has, there's a nice character development because there's a queer relationship in the book with her friend Dorothy, who's one of the broderers, has a relationship with Gilda, and they have to keep it kind of under wraps, but all the broderers know, and they're all just like nasty about it. Sorry, I've got something in my eye and it's really aggravating me. And she, first of all, is a bit, the way that she reacts to the relationship is like the other people around her, like, oh, I don't understand why you would want to be with a woman. But then like seeing the way they are together and seeing how in love they are and how committed they are to each other, it's a kind of a nice character development. So I really like that. It was just a lovely, lovely read. I would highly recommend it for a nice soothing, if you're feeling anxious and need something slow and gentle. I would highly recommend it. Not as good as Girl with a Pearl Earring, but still a very enjoyable read. Okay, so those are the only 2 books that I actually finished in May. Then I picked up, which has been on my shelves for a while, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Reni Eddo-Lodge, because I was obviously trying to educate myself about the Black Lives Matter movement, and this has been one I've been meaning to read and haven't, and I picked it up and it was fantastic. Obviously everyone's been talking about it. It's amazing. It's now a bestseller, quite rightly, and it's a really good kind of entry level to understanding the problem of white privilege, the way that white supremacy is maintained through structural racism in all facets of our society. And this was really helpful for me to then start engaging with people in difficult conversations. Now, that's one of the things that I've tried to do as, yeah, I'm going to read books, I'm going to educate myself, I'm going to understand more, I'm going to recognise my own privilege, but also I'm going to challenge racism where I see it. Because I have been one of those people where I'm not racist, but I've never been actively anti-racist, and I realise that's not good enough. I'm now reflecting back on the things that I haven't done, the things that I should do now to go forward with this, to maintain my allyship. I'm not claiming I'm a good ally. I've been shit at it. I've got a lot to learn. I've been making a lot of mistakes, and you know, it's a learning curve, and I'm committed to it, and I'm getting in lots of, I want to say arguments, I want to say confrontations with certain people. So I've mentioned before that I live in a very conservative, very white town with a lot of backward views, and mostly through the medium of social media, which is, you know, always confrontational and never great. But anytime I see a racist post from a friend or a family member, I am now challenging it, which is what I should have been doing before. And it's one of those things where you just go, oh God, have they really posted that? Yeah, idiots, and let it go. Don't say anything because you don't want to, you know, get into a row, cause a problem. And so now I have been getting into rows with people and causing problems, mostly with my family. But, you know, that's how it is. That's how it's got to be. And I've tried really hard to talk to these people and put my views across and explain the way that the things that they don't see. But because a lot of them are older people, and because they just don't see it, and even though I'm trying to articulate it, I feel like I'm failing a lot, because then they get frustrated with me and they say stuff like, oh well, let's just disagree. And I'm like, no, this isn't a point where we can just say, let's disagree on this. I'm not happy to do that. I will not talk to you about it if that's what you're saying. But every time you post something that is racist, I'm going to call you on it again and again. And I have been, and it's never ending, guys. So yeah, so I've been reading books to try and help me with those discussions and in those conversations, and this has been fantastic, as has Feminism is for Everybody by Bell Hooks. Now I've been reading this on and off, oh shiny cover, for a while, because I picked it up as part of my general feminist literature for my PhD. It's a very thin book. I think it's quite accessible. It does use academic language in here. It does assume that you know certain concepts, like what the patriarchy means. So I think I would recommend this for people who have a basic understanding of feminism and those kind of concepts. But this book was amazing. I loved it. And it talks about lots of different kinds of areas. So it starts off with the consciousness raising groups that were in the 70s that feminism arose out of, looking at the basic premise of how to end sexism, how to end violence against women, what can we do as an action-based movement. Then she goes on to talk about sisterhood and education, which is obviously very important. And then she also reflects on the thing that really resonated with me, and also I picked this out in the book by Eddo-Lodge, was the way that feminism has not acknowledged its white privilege and white supremacy, and turned away from issues of race and racism. Now, my feminism has always been intersectional. I've always said I'm an intersectional feminist. I believe in equality for everybody. That includes trans rights. That's another issue with J.K. Rowling that I'm not going to talk about now. These two books really made me realise how feminism has kind of been co-opted by the white elite and turned it from an accessible consciousness raising activism into more like a theoretical concern. It's more like I'm dealing with feminism in my academic studies, and I think it's really got divorced from its purpose, is to make people aware why we need feminism, why we need to end sexism and misogyny and violence against women. And the thing that I really liked about this book was that Bell Hooks talks about the patriarchy as the problem, not just for women, but for men and children, and how it's important that we deconstruct those patriarchal foundations that our society is based on, rather than just assimilating into them. So rather than just demanding equality, and then when you gain power, rather than just sit there in that power, question it, question the whole structure. Because feminism for everybody, equality is for everybody, then there's always people that are oppressed because of patriarchy and power. So that was really significant for me in this book. There's visionary feminism, and she talks a lot about the way that patriarchy has adverse effects for children as well, the way that we are brought up to believe there should always be a dominant person. And one of the things that is kind of close to my heart, because I've had personal experience of this, is domestic abuse within relationships that adversely affect men. So she doesn't say the importance for feminism is to stop violence. Well, she does, to stop violence against women. The importance of feminism is to stop violence against each other, which is based on the patriarchal premise that there must be a dominant person, whether that's in relationships or like within a parent-child situation. The patriarchy is to blame for all of this domination, and we have to unpick it, and we have to recognise that in order to get outside of it. So I found that really kind of thought-provoking, and would definitely recommend this. I mean, this was published in 2000, I think. So it's not the most recent. Yeah, in 2000, but it's, even now it's given me stuff to think about. So I really enjoyed this book, and I thought it was it just gave me a different perspective on certain issues, so that was really great. Okay, and then the last book that I finished in June was Don't Call Us Dead by Danez Smith. This is a poetry collection. Danez is American and writes about being queer, being black, and being HIV positive. So these poems are not only beautifully written, but profoundly moving. I think my favourite was the first one, called Summer Somewhere, which is quite a long poem, and it gives a vision of like an alternative place and time of all the black bodies that were killed at the hands of like police brutality in America, and envisages almost like a heaven for them, and it's just so moving. It was just amazing. I like when poets play with text on the page. So obviously with any poem you're going to have a certain amount of white space that does certain things with that poem, but there's a poem called Litany with Blood All Over, because Danez talks about the experience of living with HIV, and there is quite an obsession with blood running through this poetry collection. So this poem kind of starts to fall down the page here, and then as you turn over, it just like the text completely starts to disintegrate, and it's like it falls down, like it's dripping with blood, and it's quite an experience to read that. I love stuff like that. So yeah, I really love this collection. I want to get hold of their other collection, which is called Homie. So that's next on my list to find. Would highly recommend this. I think it's going to be one of those ones that I do, I mean, like with a lot of poetry collections, it's going to be one of the ones that I come back to. So very much enjoyed this. And also I will link in the description box down below some of the poems that Danez reads out, because they are a performance poet, and to hear them read their poetry is just like, it's an experience and a half. Particularly, I know lots of people have mentioned this, but Dinosaurs in the Hood is a favourite, because it's Just so awesome. So I'll link that down below so you can hear Danez read their poetry. So those are the books that I read in May and June. I've got a lot that I'm currently reading at the moment. I'm doing a reread of Ali Smith's seasonal quartet for my PhD. I'm doing some close reading with that. So at the moment I'm on winter. I am reading Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And for fiction, I have just started Mr. Loverman by Bernardine Evaristo. Got some stacks behind me here. Books I have bought recently. Books I have got from my library, which is newly opened. So July, I have read quite a few books in July, so I'll have a bit more to talk to you about then. And also I need to do my favourites from the first half of the year. How are you doing? Talk to me in the comments below. Tell me how you are. Tell me what you're reading. Have you read any of the books that I've mentioned? Probably, because everyone's reading them at the moment. Yeah. I hope you're okay, and I will speak to you in my next video. Bye guys.